FightHype.com here with the lovely Ana Julaton. Ana, actually, I mean, maybe she's not that lovely right now. She's a little sweaty, probably smelling a little funky right now. But we're at the UFC gym. You're getting in a little bit of work.
Yeah.
What's been going on?
You know, just being a fighter at heart, just going into the gym, being a gym rat, just working cross training actually.
Oh wow.
Doing the boxing, getting back into my roots of the martial arts. I have a black belt in Kempo and also Taekwondo. So just being able to, you know, just play with that a little bit, get my balance point, get my game on, and been doing a lot of the grappling aspect too. I've been working a lot with Frank Camacho. And
I saw him here earlier. That's right.
I mean, his knowledge is just unheard of, mainly because of all the fights that he has. And it's interesting because when he breaks down some of the techniques, he can actually recall a fight where it actually happened.
Oh wow.
So it's and for me it's a lot of fun because they're like, you know, there's some fighters who like to fight using a lot of muscle, a lot of power, and there's some who like to use just purely technique. So at least with Frank, he's able to verbalize it to where I can see it from a striking point of view instead of a grappling point of view, but also be able to use my body type and use a lot of the techniques. So it's a lot of work,
Sure.
but it's been brilliant. I mean, just coming back into the gym, just kind of having that fresh attitude again. I mean, just been fighting for just years, and sometimes it can get kind of stale.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to have that vibrancy again.
Yeah, yeah. How different is that working with, you know, a fighter, someone who's, you know, been in the trenches and has been there? Because, you know, I know a lot of times, even in boxing, you know, you get trainers who, you know, have never even really laced them up in a real fight before.
Right.
But, you know, they're training some of these younger boxers that are coming up, some of these younger fighters that are coming up. Can you tell the difference when you're working with someone like Frank as opposed to just a regular trainer?
Hands down. I mean, big time. I mean, I feel like I'm really lucky to a point where, I mean, fighting, it's an art in itself. Teaching is an art in itself too. So for him to articulate and verbalize and actually see it to where I can just get it right on the fly and have it remain in my mind, even if the session's done and a week passes or a couple weeks, you know, passes by, and I'm thinking, I remember that technique. You know what I mean? And for me, I feel like with MMA, it's important to know all the positions, or as much as you can, just like in boxing. Boxing's all about position. And so just being able to work with someone like a Frank, and I think a lot of it has to do with his martial arts background. We actually share a black belt in Kempo. So with that said, I think he has that discipline factor and kind of like that layout in terms of how he organizes his words, and he's able to just say, hey Anna, you know, it's kind of like this, and I'm like, oh yeah, kind of like that technique back in Kempo, and you know, it becomes like this whole language, if that makes any sense.
No, totally.
So in a lot of ways, man, I feel like I've been so lucky just to kind of just have someone who's experienced it, who's won a couple of world titles, and is able to actually verbalize it to where he can have someone as young as, I don't know, like a 10-year-old just pick up some self-defense factors of what they can use from the MMA or even boxing, and just have them just know that these are my tools that I can actually use in combat. So it's been pretty cool.
Now, obviously, you were one of the first female boxers to make the transition over into MMA.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've been paying attention to the scene right now, but it seems like there's a lot of female boxers that are moving over now. I mean, obviously Holly Holm, you know, one of the bigger names, but Heather Hardy is moving over. Amanda Serrano is now training and trying to make the move over. Just watching that, does that excite you? Is that good? I mean, it's almost a double-edged sword because I know your first love is boxing, and I'm sure you probably wish boxing, you know, women's boxing was succeeding as well as, you know, women's MMA. So is that kind of odd to see?
I wouldn't say it's odd necessarily. I mean, obviously I'm a lot happier about it. I mean, it's just, if you want to talk about gender, it's just a social issue altogether. It's something that happens worldwide, and because it happens worldwide, it ends up happening in a niche sport like in combat sports, you know what I mean? So it's an interesting time to be a female fighter. I think it's great that a lot of the other women fighters are looking at the landscape of combat sports and seeing what kind of opportunities are out there, because it doesn't just branch over from boxing to MMA. It's nice to actually see whether it's boxing or even in MMA, that there's female commentators, female spokespeople, you know, and it's starting to create a little, you know, a lot more jobs. And I feel like on the social level, that'll start, you know, changing the image and the outlook of how women are able to get these opportunities, you know. So for me, you know, if I were to step away from it and take off my fighter's eyes and look at it as an individual, I think it's brilliant. But if I put on my fighter's goggles, obviously I'm like, oh, you know, let's bring it, you know, let's get down, you know. Yeah. Because my background is still martial arts. So for me, I feel like I'm able to get that edge, and in terms of like I've started. Instead of boxing when I was little, I was throwing kicks and I was spinning around. I was like throwing knees and a whole bunch of other stuff back when I was like 10, you know. And so it's nice for me to actually step away just a little bit from both boxing and MMA and just kind of get back to the heart of it and just have fun with it, and where I can get back to just, you know, creating my own style. So yeah.
What do you think's been the difference in just the promotion of women in both sports? I mean, it seems like there's been a lot more success in MMA as opposed to boxing. Is it just because, you know, in MMA they seem to be more behind? I mean, I know boxing, they're starting to get more behind it now. I've seen a couple promoters talk about it and everything, but, you know, the TV dates are few and far between in boxing compared to MMA. So what do you think is the difference? Is it just a mentality thing as far as the promoters are concerned?
Oh, 100%. My coach, Angela Reyes, he got to talk to Scott Coker, the president of Bellator, and he was sharing a little bit of the history of Strikeforce. And he was the guy who started it out. Gina Carano was one of the products and so forth. And so he said that when he first asked the commission to have a female fight go on for MMA, it wasn't even allowed.
Wow.
So imagine that, right? But in Scott Coker's eyes, he grew up in a martial arts setting. So with that said, in a martial arts school, you're more you're more exposed to more of the family atmosphere. Men and female, boys and girls are all share the same platform. You have to show respect. So with that said, he saw it in the fight sports where he's like, well, if a guy can fight, so can a woman. So he did a whole push to actually have women's MMA into the forefront for the sport. And so I think culturally now I'm talking about fight culture. It's completely different than boxing. I mean, I remember back when I was over at Wildcard, you know, I was one of the very few women that was in there.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And I mean, a lot of women are still doing it today, but I remember just having to spar just the majority of guys, you know, just so I can get some rounds in and stuff like that. Wow. So it's just a different world altogether, obviously, because of the change, and MMA just helping out with the social image of women altogether. You're starting to see a lot more women in boxing gyms. Like, I was over at the Mayweather boxing gym, and it was pretty cool to see, like, you know, a good dozen of women just getting there, just getting work, whether they're fighting or whether they just want overall fitness, you know. So it's starting to change a little bit, and I feel like, you know, it's really important that everyone, all the women in both fight combat sports, whether it's MMA or boxing, just, you know, keep it on the forefront, always promoting, you know, just going out there and just have a positive attitude, just so we can just keep having this grow. You know what I mean? Yeah.
You mentioned Scott Coker and the time he spent with Strikeforce. I know during that time, Strikeforce, they did a lot of work with Showtime.
Yeah.
And obviously now it seems like Showtime is starting to get back into women's boxing. They have Clarissa Shields, you know, she's headlining events, which is really, really cool. Does that give you some hope that, yo, women's boxing, we're about to make a run? And if it does give you some hope, are we going to see you back in the squared circle anytime soon?
Oh my gosh. You know, if you were to ask me that question maybe a couple years ago, it would be like, yeah, you know, finally I'll have like more of a big of a chip on my shoulder, you know what I mean? Versus like right now, I'm kind of going back to, I remember Freddie Roach, he'd tell me, like one of my first lessons was, you never know that you're really going to have a fight, because so many things happens in the sport that you'll know you have a fight when you're standing in the ring in front of your opponent. That's when you know the fight's actually going to happen. You know what I mean? So for an opportunity like that for myself to happen, you know, the possibilities are endless. You know, am I going to go out there and just be like, oh, you know, this is my gung-ho position, I just want to go for it? I'm like, you know what, I'm just gonna be me. I'm gonna do me, and if everything works out the way that it does, like when I won my first world title, for instance, like I didn't plan any of that. It just kind of organically just happened. You know, I just wanted to just box, And all of a sudden, hey, you know, you're gonna fight Kelsey Jeffries, but she has like over 41 wins, but who cares? I'm like, yeah, I only have 4 wins. Why not? So with that said, I'm like, you know, possibilities are endless. If it ends up happening, you know, let's bring it. I think Bellator will definitely bring out the platform for it, especially with them promoting female fighters, especially when you have specialties like myself who does boxing and MMA, and Heather Hardy who does boxing and MMA. I mean, you know, let's bring it on. I think if it's proposed correctly, and if all of us do our part, we can hype it up to where it can be, you know, just a huge event, especially since you have the Mayweather versus Conor McGregor fight going on. You're having the cross fight sports all move together. So the timing's there, you know, but at the same time too, I'm not trying to look too far ahead. I'm just thinking about getting my reps straightened out and make sure that it counts, so I can set myself up for the next day and the day after and the weeks ahead of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, it makes sense, totally. You did mention Scott Coker and Bellator, so I have to ask. There's rumblings that you could potentially be making an appearance, a debut in Bellator MMA.
Yeah, we're looking at the landscape. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of opportunities now for female fighters, and you know, I'm just gonna keep that in the back of my mind, and which is why I'm doing a lot of cross training in the gym. So I'll just leave it at that. You know, whether I get a shot at Bellator and they put a grappler in front of me, a Muay Thai fighter or a boxer or a karate person, you know, for me that excites me, that challenges me. You know, if that ends up happening, you know, sign me up, let's go. So, you know, just keeping it with it, staying in the moment. I'm just staying in the moment.
Do you ever look at the landscape and picture like what the mega fight is for you? Like, do you have your eye on any of the other ladies out there and just like, yeah, that's something that I think we could build up to something big?
Yeah, I think it'll be a mega fight if we were to have someone like me and Heather Hardy, you know, go toe to toe, whether it be both MMA or boxing. And I think that's something that hasn't been done before, and I think that's something that people can gravitate towards. And I think it can also be an opportunity to open up a lot more doors for other female fighters. So, you know, if that happens, and if it doesn't, oh wow. You know, I'm sure it wasn't supposed to happen at that time. But in the meantime, you know, I'm just, you know, just enjoying life.
Yeah.
Because you know how crazy this fight sports is. I
Absolutely.
mean, so something, you can plan for something and train for something and be prepared for something, and all of a sudden it's just taken away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, I'm not even gonna spend my energy in that. I'd rather be more intense about throwing my right hand or throwing out my spin kick, or, you know, just trying to do a double leg takedown on someone, and spend more of my focus on that. So it's a lot of knowing what to focus on.
If that fight did come about, would you have a preference on where it would take place, in the cage or in the ring?
Oh, it doesn't matter. Yeah. For me, like it's such an interesting time because, especially for me, because I really got to step away from it all. I got clouded with a lot of different stuff, and I was trying to figure out fight sports for a female in this world, especially in the United States.
Yeah.
And you know, just because I have just such great support. I have amazing coaches. I have amazing people. Like, my family is just 100% down. And, you know, I look at all the good things about just being a fighter or a martial artist. And so, you know, I just, kind of lost it there.
No, you know what would be cool is if they did the first fight in the cage and a rematch in a ring. That'd be unprecedented.
Oh yeah, you were talking about that. Yeah, I got so caught up with just the training portion of it. Oh yeah, you know, let's bring it on. You know, and I'm sure a lot of people would love to see, whether you're a boxing fan or not, you know, me throwing a spin kick at Heather Hardy's face, you know, and her trying to like, you know, counter with like a double leg takedown or something like that, you know. Yeah. And then after there, we go through the art of pugilism, where we go old school with it, you know, getting 8-ounce gloves, and then we're throwing down. You know, they're brilliant in their own respect, and just to be able to just have that challenge as a fighter, I mean, it's a dream. You know, so no preference. I don't care. It could be outside. You know, I'm sure you see it all the time. You know, fighters are just ready to go.
Yeah.